Grand Admiral Torvak drummed his 7 elongated fingers against the polished obsidian command console, his pale blue skin reflecting in its surface. The war room of the Galactic Hegemony flagship Eternal Dominance hummed with nervous energy as subordinates scurried about, their movements jerky with anxiety. "Sir," his assistant Lena approached, her cranial ridges pulsing an alarming shade of orange. "The unidentified vessel has breached the Orion exclusion zone. Long-range scanners confirm it originated from the quarantine system." Torvak's upper lip curled in what passed for a smile among the Velexi. "You mean to tell me that some backwater primitives managed to cobble together a spacecraft capable of reaching our territory? How quaint." He waved a dismissive hand. "Send the standard first contact protocols and prepare the integration documents. There are another species to add to our collection." Lena hesitated, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Sir, preliminary scans indicate the vessel is well. It's a warship. And it's not responding to any of our hailing frequencies." "A warship? From Earth?" Torvak actually laughed, a harsh barking sound that made several junior officers flinch. Those monkeys barely figured out how to split the atom without destroying themselves. What could they possibly? "Admiral," interrupted Commander Jackson, his voice unusually grave as he approached with a holographic display. "You need to see this." The projection expanded to fill the center of the war room. There, rotating slowly in perfect detail, was the Earth vessel. It looked nothing like the sleek, organic curves of hegemony battleships. This monstrosity was all hard angles and exposed metal, bristling with what appeared to be weapons systems arranged in no discernible pattern. Massive engine ports glowed an ominous red at its rear. The vessel dwarfed their standard patrol cruisers by at least 3 times. "What in the 7 moons is that ugly thing?" Torvak whispered, his earlier amusement evaporating faster than water on a neutron star. "They call it redemption, sir," Jackson replied. "And it's on a direct course for the hegemony capital." Torvak's cranial ridge darkened to a deep purple. "Increase our alert status. Dispatch surveillance drones. I want to know everything about this vessel, yesterday." "Yes, sir," Lena nodded, but paused before turning away. "Sir, there's one more thing. They're broadcasting something on all frequencies. It's not directed at us specifically. It seems to be music." From the ship's communication array came a rhythmic, pounding sound, overlaid with a single human voice repeating the same phrase over and over. "We're back, baby." Torvak felt, for the first time in his 300-year career, a distinctly unfamiliar sensation crawling up his spine. He believed the humans called it dread. Ambassador Cantor adjusted his ceremonial vestments for the 5th time in as many minutes. The diplomatic shuttle hummed softly as it approached the human vessel, its sleek golden hull reflecting the distant starlight. "Remember your training," he instructed the 4-member diplomatic team. "Humans are classified as a Category 7 species, technologically adolescent but psychologically unstable. Show no fear, make no sudden movements, and absolutely no jokes about their unusual appearance." Diplomat Neri, fresh from the academy, nervously fingered her translation pendant. "Is it true they only have 2 eyes? How do they perceive depth properly?" Before Cantor could answer, the shuttle lurched violently, throwing them against their restraints. "We're being scanned," shouted the pilot, his scales flaring with alarm. "Multiple penetrating beams. They're looking at everything." "Impossible," Cantor sputtered. "Our shields are diplomat grade. No species at their development level should be able to." "Ambassador," the pilot interrupted, his voice trembling. "They're hailing us. Video format." Cantor smoothed his vestments once more and stood as straight as his flexible spine would allow. "Accept transmission." The view screen flickered to life, displaying a human female with short auburn hair and a face marked with small brown spots across the nose and cheeks. Behind her, other humans moved about a command center, that looked chaotic and disorganized to Cantor's eyes. "Greetings, Ambassador Cantor of the Galactic Hegemony," the human said in perfect galactic standard. Her face arranged in what the briefing materials identified as a smile, though it looked disconcertingly like a threat display. "I'm Captain Eleanor Barnes of the Earth Defense Force Battleship Redemption. Sorry about the thorough scan, but we've learned to be cautious. You wouldn't believe how many species have tried to deliver explosives disguised as welcome baskets." Cantor felt his third stomach clench. How did they know his name and title? The shuttle's identification transponder only carried basic diplomatic markers. "Captain Barnes," he began, trying to mask his unease. "Your presence in hegemony space constitutes a violation of Galactic Quarantine Regulation 359B, which clearly states that developing species must remain within their solar system until formal invitation is extended by the Council." Barnes' smile grew wider, showing teeth definitely a threat display. "About that," she replied, lifting a cup containing a steaming brown liquid to her lips. "We've spent 300 years waiting for an invitation that never came. Meanwhile, we've had 17 different alien species land on our planet, abduct our citizens, probe them in uncomfortable places, and generally treat Earth like some backwoods vacation spot." She took a casual sip. "We figured it was time to introduce ourselves properly." Cantor blinked his central eye in confusion. "I assure you, Captain, the hegemony has no record of any." "Permission to come aboard, Ambassador?" Barnes interrupted. "Or would you prefer to continue this conversation over scones and coffee in our diplomatic lounge?" Back on the Eternal Dominance, Grand Admiral Torvak watched the exchange with growing alarm. "They've compromised our diplomatic shuttle's security systems," Commander Jackson reported. "They accessed our entire database in seconds during that scan." Torvak's cranial ridge darkened to almost black. "This has gone far enough. Deploy Battle Group Zenith. 3 warships should remind these primitives of their place in the galactic order." Within minutes, 3 crescent-shaped destroyers dropped out of hyperspace, positioning themselves in attack formation around the Redemption. Their weapon ports glowed an ominous green, energy building to just below firing threshold, the standard intimidation procedure for upstart species. On the viewscreen, Cantor watched Captain Barnes glance at something off-screen. She raised an eyebrow, then turned to someone behind her. "Hey Marcus, are you seeing this? They sent the welcome committee." A male human voice responded from somewhere off-screen. "Oh yeah, check out those cute little ships. The crescents are adorable like hostile fortune cookies." Laughter erupted across the human bridge. Actual laughter. Cantor felt his blood run cold. No species in recorded history had ever laughed at a hegemony battle formation. Barnes turned back to the screen, wiping moisture from her eyes. "I'm sorry, Ambassador. We don't mean to be rude. It's just, well, we were expecting something a bit more impressive after all the stories we've heard." She composed herself, though her eyes still crinkled at the corners. "Now, about joining the galactic community, we're not asking permission. We're merely extending the courtesy of notification." Grand Admiral Torvak paced the circular War Council chamber, his claws clicking against the polished floor. The holographic display of the human vessel rotated slowly in the center of the room, highlighted sections blinking with each new scan report. "Impossible," muttered Chief Science Officer Vril, her tendrils twitching as she analyzed the data. "Their hull composition shouldn't work. It's a patchwork of materials that would normally be incompatible." She zoomed in on a section, and these energy readings, they're using some form of nested shield technology that overlaps in ways our systems can't properly analyze. "What about weapons?" Torvak demanded. "Uncertain," Vril replied. "We detect multiple energy signatures consistent with directed energy weapons, but also what appear to be projectile launchers." She sounded confused. Physical ammunition in space combat went extinct 5,000 years ago across the known galaxy. Commander Pelax, head of the Hegemony Military Council, stepped forward. his scarred face contorted into a grimace. "Admiral, we should strike now, while we have the element of surprise. Whatever this vessel is, it represents technology that shouldn't exist at their development level. They clearly had outside help, perhaps from the Trisani Rebellion." "That's speculative at best," countered Ambassador Cantor, who had returned from his shuttle visibly shaken. The human captain seemed willing to communicate. "Intelligence has something to share," interrupted Torvak, nodding to a figure standing in the shadowed periphery of the chamber. Intelligence Officer Marek stepped into the light. Unlike the other Velexi, his skin was a mottled gray, modified for covert operations. "For the past solar cycle, we've received fragmented reports from the Outer Rim. Small systems dropping out of communication, trade routes being disrupted. We dismissed them as isolated incidents." He tapped a command into his wrist device, changing the holographic display to a star map. Red dots appeared across several sectors. Each red marker represents a system that has gone silent, then resumed communications with altered protocols. Our deep cover agents report the same story, vessels matching crude human design principles appearing, followed by rapid integration of the local government. A stunned silence fell over the council. "How many systems?" asked Cantor quietly. 23, replied Marek. "All minor, none with significant hegemony presence. But the pattern is concerning." "We should call for reinforcements from the Central Fleet," suggested Vril. "And show weakness?" scoffed Palax. "No. We eliminate this threat now, before they realize we've uncovered their expansion." Torvak held up a hand for silence. "Before we decide, there's something you should see." He accessed the central archives with his command codes. Historical record retrieval, species designation human, pre-quarantine interactions. The hologram shifted to display footage that made several council members gasp. It showed primitive human spacecraft engaging with Frisian scout ships, a species that had attempted covert study of Earth centuries ago. The Frisian vessels, technologically superior in every way, fired upon a human orbital platform. What happened next defied explanation. The humans, using technology that shouldn't have worked, improvised a defense that not only repelled the Frisian attack, but resulted in the capture of one of their vessels. "This was over 200 years ago," Torvak said grimly. "The Frisians underestimated human resourcefulness and paid for it with an entire scout fleet. The Joraxians made the same mistake 70 years later, losing 3 research vessels." He paused, looking around the chamber. The quarantine wasn't just to protect the galaxy from humans. It was to protect humans from us, giving us time to prepare for their eventual emergence. Cantor's eyes widened in understanding. The hegemony never intended to invite them into the galactic community. "Of course not," Pilax said dismissively. "They're too unpredictable, too aggressive. The plan was to contain them until we could properly manage their development." "And now," Torvak said, staring at the image of the redemption, "they've managed themselves right to our doorstep." Grand Admiral Torvak stood ramrod straight on the command deck of the Eternal Dominance, hands clasped behind his back. The enormous view screen displayed the human vessel, which hung in space like an angular predator among the sleek curves of the hegemony ships. "Open a direct channel to the human vessel," Torvak ordered, his voice carrying the weight of 13 generations of military leadership. The communications officer worked his console. "Channel open, Admiral." Torvak stepped forward. "This is Grand Admiral Torvak of the Galactic Hegemony. Your presence here constitutes an illegal incursion into sovereign space. You have 1 standard hour to power down your weapons systems and prepare for escort back to your solar system. Failure to comply will result in your immediate destruction. There will be no further warnings." The bridge fell silent, all eyes on the view screen. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then Captain Barnes appeared, looking remarkably unconcerned. She appeared to be eating something from a small container, chewing thoughtfully before responding. Sorry about the delay, she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Lunch break. We've got this stuff called yogurt that's absolutely fantastic with granola. She set the container aside. Regarding your ultimatum, Grand Admiral, I have a simple response. That would be unwise. Commander Pelax stepped forward, his face contorted with rage. You dare threaten the might of the hegemony? Your primitive vessel stands no chance against our armada. Barnes looked almost bored. Is this the part where we're supposed to tremble in fear? Your ships are impressive. I'll grant you that. Very pretty. But I'm afraid we can't leave just yet. We've got business with the Galactic Council regarding the illegal quarantine of Earth and the documented abduction of 342 human citizens over the past century. Pelax turned to Torvak, speaking in a harsh whisper. Admiral, they mock us openly. Permission to deliver a warning shot? After a moment's hesitation, Torvak nodded. Demonstrate our superior firepower. Target their forward section with the pulse cannons. Minimal power. Pelax smiled viciously as he relayed the order. On the view screen, Captain Barnes raised an eyebrow but made no move to respond. The nearest hegemony destroyer fired a brilliant green energy beam that struck the Redemption's forward hull. The beam splashed across what appeared to be empty space several meters from the actual hull, dissipating in a shower of sparks. Fascinating, Barnes commented, glancing at something off-screen. Your weapon's signatures are remarkably similar to the Joraxian designs. I wonder if there's a connection there. She turned to someone out of view. Lieutenant Walker, prepare a system disruption demonstration. Non-lethal parameters. What is she talking about? Torvak demanded, but his question was answered a moment later as the Redemption's hull shifted, panels sliding aside to reveal a device, unlike anything he'd seen before. It emitted no energy signature that their sensors could detect, yet it began to glow with an eerie blue-white light. Admiral, the tactical officer called out in alarm. The Vigilant is reporting system failures across all decks. On the tactical display, one of the Crescent destroyers began drifting out of formation, its running lights flickering erratically. What's happening? Torvak demanded. Unknown, sir. The Vigilant reports all weapons, propulsion, and communication systems are offline. Life support and artificial gravity remain functional. Captain Barnes' voice came through the still-open channel. That was our electromagnetic pulse cannon, or EMP for short. Old technology by our standards, but remarkably effective against your neural network ship designs. Don't worry, your crew is perfectly safe. We've calibrated it to spare life support and essential systems. We're not monsters, after all. All ships, full defensive protocols, Torvak shouted. Sever all neural connections and switch to isolated command systems. But it was too late. 2 more destroyers went dark, drifting helplessly. We've lost contact with the Resolute and the Dauntless, reported the communications officer, panic creeping into his voice. Fleet command network is compromised. Across the bridge, officers frantically worked to isolate their systems from the spreading disruption. Warning klaxons blared throughout the ship. This is impossible, Pelax muttered, watching as more ships reported systems failures. Their technology shouldn't be capable of this. Torvak's cranial ridge darkened to the deepest black, a sign of extreme stress. He made his decision in an instant. All functioning vessels, this is Grand Admiral Torvak. Deploy Sunfire protocols. Authorization, Torvak 7 prime extinction. Target the human vessel with all available weaponry. A hush fell over the bridge. The Sunfire protocol was reserved for extinction-level threats to the hegemony itself. Sir, the weapons officer said quietly, that would violate 17 galactic conventions on proportional response. Do it, Torvak snapped, before we lose everything. The remaining hegemony ships began powering up their most destructive weapons, antimatter catalyzed plasma cannons designed to reduce planets to molten slag. On the view screen, Captain Barnes sighed and shook her head. So that's how it's going to be. Very well. She turned and gave a nod to someone off-screen. Major Daniels, they've opted for the hard lesson. You have permission to deploy interceptors. The hull of the Redemption seemed to come alive, sections sliding apart to reveal row upon row of smaller craft. They poured forth like angry insects from a disturbed hive, hundreds of them, each no larger than a shuttle but moving with impossible speed and coordination. What are those? Torvak whispered, watching as the swarm of small craft split into precise formations, each targeting a different hegemony vessel. Admiral, the communications officer called out, we're picking up transmissions between the human vessels. They're not encrypted. Let me hear them, Torvak ordered. The bridge filled with human voices, casual and conversational despite the battle unfolding. Raven Squadron, taking point on the big one with the fancy fins. Copy that, Raven lead. Eagle Squadron, we've got the flanking destroyers. Hey Garcia, bet I can disable more weapon ports than you. In your dreams, Patel. Loser buys drinks at the next shore leave. All units, remember the captain's orders, disable only, no casualties if possible. Man, these aliens really don't understand the concept of proportional response, do they? Their loss, our gain. Let's show them how Earth handles bullies. Torvak stared in growing horror as the human voices laughing, joking, making wagers coordinated a devastatingly effective assault on the pride of the hegemony fleet. The silence of space betrayed the violence unfolding as the hegemony fleet unleashed its full arsenal. Antimatter torpedoes, plasma lances, and graviton beams, weapons designed to shatter moons, converged on the Redemption in a symphony of destruction. Direct hits confirmed, announced the tactical officer, a note of satisfaction in his voice. The view screen showed the human vessel engulfed in blinding energy discharges, tracking massive energy fluctuations in their hull integrity. For a moment, Torvak allowed himself to hope. Then the energy dissipated, revealing the Redemption intact, though visibly damaged in sections. Impossible, Pelax breathed. Those were planet killer weapons. The sensor officer's voice cracked as he reported, scans indicate they have multiple overlapping defense systems. The outer layer absorbed 70% of our attack energy. A secondary shield deflected another 20%. Only 10% actually reached their hull. On the still open channel, they heard Captain Barnes' voice, unnervingly calm, partial hull breach in sections 5 through 7. Activate secondary containment. Medical teams to Deck 4. Another human voice responded, already on it, Captain. Damage control reports minimal casualties, mostly minor injuries. Good. Execute response pattern Delta. Let's show them what happens when you bring antimatter to a gunfight. The Redemption's hull reconfigured itself, the damaged sections sealing as new weapon ports opened. A barrage of what appeared to be physical projectiles, missiles of some kind, launched toward the hegemony fleet. Primitive kinetic weapons, scoffed Pelax. Our shields are designed to. The missiles detonated before impact, each explosion releasing clouds of metallic particles that enveloped several hegemony vessels. Within seconds, the affected ship's shields fluctuated and failed. Meanwhile, the human interceptors swarmed around the larger hegemony battlecruisers, moving with impossible agility. They targeted weapon emplacements and sensor arrays with surgical precision, disabling rather than destroying. Raven 3, I've got a lock on their main power conduit, came a human voice over the open channel. Nice spot, Jackson. Firing EMP darts and boom. That's another one powered down. Squadron 2, form up on my position. We've got a big one trying to make a run for the hyperspace point. Copy that, Major. Hey, anyone notice these alien ships look like fortune cookies? I'm getting hungry. Oh, focus, Rivera. Take out those engines, then you can daydream about takeout. Laughter followed actual laughter in the middle of combat. Torvak's hands trembled as he gripped the command console. Why are they broadcasting in the clear? Are they insane? Intelligence Officer Merrick's expression was grim. No, Admiral. They want us to hear. They're showing us that they don't fear us knowing their tactics. It's psychological warfare. It's barbaric, hissed Pilax. They treat battle like some form of entertainment. Another barrage from the Redemption knocked out the propulsion systems on 3 more hegemony vessels. The remaining ships attempted to regroup, but the human interceptors predicted every maneuver, always one step ahead. Admiral, the communications officer reported, we've lost 27 ships. All disabled, not destroyed. Life support remains functional on all vessels. Torvak stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The carefully orchestrated formations of the hegemony fleet had dissolved into chaos while the human forces moved with coordinated precision. They're toying with us, he realized aloud. They could have destroyed us from the beginning. The final pieces clicked into place in Torvak's mind. The open communications, the non-lethal attacks, the surgical precision. This wasn't just a battle, it was a demonstration. Admiral, Lena approached, her voice quivering. The Redemption is hailing us again. On the view screen, Captain Barnes appeared, standing calmly despite a small cut above her eye and smoke visible in the background. Grand Admiral Torvak, she said, not a hint of anger in her voice. I think we've made our point. Your remaining ships are surrounded, and I suspect your tactical display confirms you have no path to victory. Shall we discuss terms, or would you prefer to continue this educational exercise? Grand Admiral Torvak stood on the bridge of his once mighty flagship, now powerless except for life support and artificial gravity. Through the view screen, he watched as human interceptors surrounded his vessel in a perfect spherical formation. The eternal dominance, pride of the hegemony fleet, reduced to a floating hulk. Admiral, Lena whispered, engineering reports all weapons systems have failed. Propulsion is offline. We're defenseless. Pilax slammed his fist against a dead console. We should self-destruct. Deny these primitives the satisfaction of our surrender. And sacrifice 10,000 crew members? Torvak shook his head. To what end, Commander? Pride? The holographic projector in the center of the bridge activated unexpectedly, revealing Captain Barnes. This time she wasn't on her bridge but appeared to be walking down a corridor, occasionally nodding to crew members passing by. Hope you don't mind the intrusion, she said casually. Your holographic systems were surprisingly easy to access. I thought a more private conversation might be appropriate at this juncture. Torvak straightened his posture, determined to maintain dignity in defeat. State your terms, human. Barnes stopped walking and looked directly at Torvak. First, I want to be clear about something. We could have destroyed your entire fleet. Our tactical simulations gave us 14 different ways to do so with minimal risk to our vessel. She gestured, and a series of tactical projections appeared beside her image, showing various scenarios of the hegemony fleet being systematically annihilated. But that's not who we are, she continued. Contrary to what your historical records might suggest, humans value life. All life, even that of those who would destroy us. Each of your ships contains thousands of individuals who were simply following orders. Yet you attacked without provocation, Pilax accused. Barnes raised an eyebrow. Did we? We defended ourselves after you fired upon us. We disabled your ships while minimizing casualties. Even now, our medical teams are preparing to render aid to your injured. She paused, her expression softening slightly. Grand Admiral, humanity spent centuries watching the stars, wondering if we were alone. When we discovered we weren't, we reached out in peace. We were met with abductions, experimentation, and quarantine. Despite this, we persevered. We learned. We grew. And yes, we prepared to defend ourselves. What do you want? Torvak asked quietly. Simple. Humanity will join the galactic community, not as subjects to be studied or contained, but as equals. The quarantine ends today. Earth will send representatives to your council. We will share some of our technologies, particularly our medical advances, which I suspect you'll find quite impressive." She smiled then, but there was steel behind it. "In return, all records of human abductions will be released. Those responsible will face justice, our justice. And any species that has participated in these violations will make reparations as we deem appropriate." Torvak considered the alternatives and found none. "And if we refuse?" "We've already demonstrated what happens then," Barnes replied simply. "But I don't think it will come to that. Your people are pragmatic, Admiral. They'll adapt. They might even learn to like us, eventually." 3 standard months later, the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Hegemony buzzed with unprecedented activity. Representatives from all 47 member species crowded the viewing galleries as, one by one, human diplomatic teams were formally introduced. Torvak, demoted but still respected for handling the surrender with minimal loss of life, watched from a side balcony as Captain Barnes, now Ambassador Barnes, approached the central podium. Behind her walked a diverse group of humans, each wearing a uniform representing different aspects of Earth's united government. "Who would have thought," murmured Lena, standing at his side, "that the species we feared would become our most enthusiastic allies?" Torvak observed the humans greeting various alien representatives, adapting their gestures to accommodate different physiologies with practiced ease. "They're remarkable," he admitted. "In just 3 months, they've revolutionized our medical technology, proposed trade agreements beneficial to all parties, and even helped resolve the Cygnus border dispute that's raged for centuries." "Do you regret how we treated them?" Lena asked quietly. Torvak watched as Ambassador Barnes laughed at something the Juraxian delegate said. The same species that had once abducted humans for study, now engaged in friendly dialogue. "I regret underestimating them," he replied. "But perhaps that was their greatest weapon all along. The galaxy feared what humanity might become if left unchecked. None of us considered they might become exactly what we needed."